All right, we are live, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Verity podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss hot topics in the literary scene and how the woke culture, woke ideology has infected the Australian literature scene, and we want to talk about that. So, welcome, welcome, everyone. How are you going, Michelle?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Excellent.
So, there's been drama in the Australian literary scene yet again.
Of course.
Uh, um, we want to discuss today what happened in the Bendigo Writers Festival, what went wrong, um, and our kind of this drama speaks to what we've been speaking about in our on our podcast. It really speaks
Mm,
to the core of what we're trying to reveal or make visible in the Australian literature scene. So
Yeah, that's really true, Morgan. Actually, it shone a light on a lot of issues that we've been sort of pointing to. Um, yeah, it made things pretty clear. Interesting.
yes, yes. So do you want to kick off with what happened?
Yeah, I'll give a little breakdown because it was about a month ago now. So this kicked off on 13th of August. So the festival itself was 16th to 18th of August. So like a little long weekend festival, regional festival, nice lineup. I think they had something like 50-ish panels going over 3 days. And writers are always really happy to get the opportunity to appear. So it would be nice if we could have a writers' festival that went ahead without, derailment, but no. So the festival faced controversy due to a last-minute code of conduct issued to participants, leading to widespread withdrawals and public debate over censorship and free speech. So the email was sent, I think, to a lot of the some of the participants only sort of on the Thursday night, and the festival was kicking off on the Friday. So we can get into this later. I think that Bendigo definitely mishandled this, and that became part of the problem. But basically, the email contained a code of conduct which instructed speakers to avoid language or topics that could be considered inflammatory, divisive, or disrespectful, which is unhelpfully vague. And
Yeah.
it also asked speakers to avoid public comment or social media posts that could harm the festival's reputation or cause public concern. So that's already going to get people's backs up. And the worst thing, I think, in most people's minds was that it bound certain sessions of the festival that were sponsored by La Trobe University to an anti-racism policy which the university has undertaken to support, that lists criticism of Israel as an example of anti-Semitism, among other things. But that's sort of the most controversial part of the policy that people are not happy with. So high-profile writers, including Randa Abdel Fattah, Evelyn Lewin, Jess Hill, Claire Coleman, and Thomas Mayo, confirmed they would not participate. And then there was an open letter, of course. There's got to be an open letter that went
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
About 200 or more people signed this. 50 writers eventually pulled out, many issuing social media solidarity statements, which we're going to have a look at later, citing freedom of speech concerns and objection to the code. And then Professor Claire Wright resigned as guest curator for La Trobe sessions, which we can chat about later as well. And by Friday, 15th of August, which is the opening day of the festival, it went ahead, but with a really diminished program. I think there were about 20 events cancelled, so it pretty much halved the festival, and it kind of limped along. And from someone I know who was at the festival on that first day, they said that it took all the joy out of the festival. Like they were, even though they weren't sort of involved in any sort of political panels, like you could cut the tension with the knife at the festival, and it was really awkward to be there. People were really worried that their names were going to be posted on social media as someone who hadn't like withdrawn, and it just, the whole thing was basically kind of a downer. So that's what happened.
Yeah, yikes. There's a lot to unpack there. So I guess the first place we could potentially begin this conversation about what happened in the festival was the festivals, they use their definition of anti-racism was from Latrobe universities.
Yeah, so this is a new definition adopted by Universities Australia, and I remember this happening. This was controversial in itself when this definition was sort of signed off on. So it was unanimously endorsed by 39 vice chancellors of Australian universities on 27th of February this year, based on the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition. And basically it talks about all sorts of racism. It also talks about Islamophobia, and basically the universities have to be safe spaces, blah blah blah. But it did endorse the following working definition of anti-Semitism, and I suppose in some people's minds the controversial bits were these bits: that criticism of the policies and practice of the Israeli government or state is not in and of itself anti-Semitic. However, criticism of Israel can be anti-Semitic when it is grounded in harmful tropes, stereotypes, or assumptions, or when it calls for the elimination of the state of Israel or all Jews, or when it holds Jewish individuals or communities responsible for Israel's actions. It can be anti-Semitic to make assumptions about what Jewish individuals think based only on the fact that they are Jewish. All peoples, including Jews, have the right to self-determination. For most, but not all, Jewish Australian Zionism, is a core part of their Jewish identity, and substituting the word Zionist for Jew does not eliminate the possibility of speech being anti-Semitic. So based on this, Randa Abdel Fattah, who's a prominent Palestinian Australian writer and activist and academic, withdrew because she said that she didn't feel she could speak freely about her opinions on the war in Gaza without possibly running foul of this definition. So that's sort of where the whole furor started.
Yeah, it's very strange to me that they would they would invite her and then expect her to abide by that definition, when, from my understanding, she doesn't believe Israel should exist. From what I know.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what's the festival doing there? That's just not going to work. You either, have a conversation, you invite her on, let her spew her ideas, but you also bring the counter person, a Jewish representative who would speak from the Jewish perspective, and then you can have a place where you can exchange ideas. But that's just
that's a good point, Margaret. Like, why invite someone like Randa? Like, she's never been, unless you want to hear her views, right? And let her express her views, because she's never been backward in coming forward about her views. And some people think this is great. Other people think she's anti-Semitic. Okay, but we know what her views are, because she's very forthright with her views on social media. In fact, I remember on Facebook on October 7th, when the first attacks happened in Israel, she was one of those people who actually put the paragliding like meme or picture, and celebrating this attack. So she's not backwards in coming forward with her views.
Right.
So from my understanding, there was a collective of people called the 5A group, which sounds a bit shady, but I think it's just a It's a, I know, it's a bit weird. I think it's a collective of academics who sort of vaguely get together to agitate against anti-Semitism.
Right.
And I think they sent this letter. Now, this was in July, okay, this year. So this was more than a month before this decision was handed down, and this other email was sent by Bendigo Writers Festival at the last minute to let Runda and others know that they weren't able to say this or that. So I don't know what Bendigo were doing in the month in between. They were obviously, clutching their pearls and deciding how to deal with this. So
Right. Yeah.
they sent this letter on July 21st. And that's fine. I think if people have concerns about somebody, it's okay to send a letter, depending what you say, right?
Yeah.
In this letter, they basically said that they were concerned about the invitation of Dr. Fatah to speak at the event, speaking about the war in Gaza and in relation to her book Discipline. They said she's widely known for her anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli rhetoric, which I think is pretty self-evident.
Yeah.
And they basically then quoted a whole lot of stuff that she had said that they considered to be anti-Semitic and difficult, such as Jews have no claim or right to cultural safety. It is a duty to ensure. She said, Jews have no claim or right to cultural safety. It is a duty to ensure that every space Zionists enter is culturally unsafe for them, and that any institution that considers the fragile feelings of Zionists are abhorrent. She also said resistance is a moral imperative, struggle is a moral and legal right, and that Western governments have zero moral authority. And she asked her followers to repudiate the legitimacy of law. This is just quoting from the letter of 5A. There's other things that they quoted in there. So basically they quoted things that she had said herself. And what I found interesting was they didn't actually ask for her to be deplatformed. They said that they were concerned about her views just kind of going unchallenged.
Yeah,
and
right.
They said, for the majority of Jewish people, Zionism does not mean denial of Palestinian rights to self-determination. On the contrary, many support the coexistence of both entities. However, the denial of the right of Jews to self-determination is a form of anti-Semitism, and that based on this and the fact that a lot of Jews consider themselves Zionists without being anti-Palestinian, they thought it would be fair to show both sides of the debate should be presented. This might include balancing the invitation of an extremist anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activist, they mean Runda, with the inclusion of a representative from one of the mainstream Jewish Zionist organizations on the same panel. So they were looking, as you say, the 5A group who sent the letter to have a balanced view. One person putting up their view, and then say a Zionist Jewish person putting up their view. And I think, as you mentioned, Morgan, that would have been preferable. Like I'm a bit of a free speech bro, and I feel like, let Runda go at it, and then let someone else go at it, and let's have that conversation. That's what writers' festivals are for.
Right. Or if the festival is against racism or anti-Semitism, then just don't invite her.
Yeah.
Don't invite her. So there comes a point where you have to actually have a little bit of backbone and stand on principle.
Yes.
Stand on principle and don't invite her. If your values are anti-racism, anti-Semitism, then do that and do that.
Yeah.
But you can't play both sides.
No.
Particularly
it blew up for that reason.
Of course it blew up. But it's to me it's quite simple. Like to say that Jewish people don't have a right to self-determine is anti-Semitism to me.
Yeah.
90%
That's
Jews.
Sure. Oh, sorry, go on. You go on.
And 90% of Jewish people are, they do want the state of Israel to exist. 90%. They do identify as Zionists. So to me, a Zionist is someone who just wants the state of Israel to exist.
Yeah.
That's just what a Zionist is,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to want the eradication of Zionists, to me, is a sneaky way of really wanting to eradicate Jewish people. From my perspective, that's just what it is for me. It's as clear as day.
Mm. And I know that you also think that as well, Morgan, because you've got, like, from your background and from growing up, you've got a familiarity with sort of Islamic thinking that, people like myself don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
So I suppose for people looking from outside of that, if you're being told that, it's just anti-Zionist, it's not anti-Semitic, then, we're all like, oh, maybe, because, everyone wants to sort of do the right thing, we're all good liberals, blah, blah, blah. But whereas you have this different view, I'm wondering if you could, like, let us know how you feel about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I grew up Muslim, very conservative Muslim, very very traditional. And I was taught that part of being Muslim is one day we will have power, and we will have the responsibility to off Jews. And I know Rhonda knows that because she's Muslim and she grew up Muslim. So it's just when I hear her or her ilk speak of social justice, it just drives me absolutely crazy because you and I know what Islam is. You and I know what the ideology that you like to promote, of which designates you as a woman as second class citizen. So you're under Islam. A woman's, for example, a woman's testimony under Islam is half that of a man. So it just drives me absolutely crazy. And in Islam, being anti-Semitic is part and parcel of being of Islam. So it's just it's crazy, and the fact that she doesn't speak out against Hamas, who
this is a thing, yeah.
Who are a terrorist organization,
Yeah.
who off gay people, and you can criticize Israel if you want.
Of course, yeah.
You can criticize it. Anyone can criticize Israel. And that's
Yeah.
not the point here. The moment you decide to, the moment you think it's okay to eradicate Jewish people, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and it seems like there's definitely an element of the pro-Palestinian movement, which is less about just concern for Palestinian people and more just about eradicating Israel. And, I say that with a lot of qualifications because I'm thinking about that huge march that was across Sydney Harbour Bridge, about a month ago as well. I know lots of people who went to that march, and they're really nice people, they're good people, and their hearts and their intentions are in the right place. But I also feel like walking within that march, there were also a lot of quite extreme people, and there were a lot of flags of extremism there and pictures of Khomeini and so forth. So you've got this sort of mix of different motivations and different people amongst that. I just think it's best to be honest about that as well.
It is, it is. And I just want to also say, I always talk about this, and I always say this, the communists, Marxists have partnered up with Islamists. A lot of people do say that. I mean, it's what has happened in the left. The progressives have partnered up with Islamists, all in the name of bringing down the system. All in the name of trying to destroy the Enlightenment and individuality and all that sort of stuff. But the same thing happens in the Muslim community, where you have the Rondas of the world who can speak to the West, can speak to the elites, can speak the academic language, and understands how to maneuver through the system. And the Rondas of the world, are like like compare it with the Islamists and the progressives coming up to speak to the wider society. But then behind the scenes, there's that relationship that's happening with the real conservatives, or the political extreme Muslims. Like when I was Muslim, the academic, it's about 10, 12 years ago, there was a bubbling movement in the Muslim world, particularly in Melbourne, where there was a growing Muslim academics who were trying to speak truth to power, and they borrowed a lot of like post-colonial theory, post-colonialism, postmodernism, excuse me, theory, and they were, trying to use that language to sort of undermine this, Australian way of life, put it that way. And so this group, they wanted to sort of go defend Islam by going back to the tradition. So what they would often do is they would attack the Muslims they saw as moderates. The Muslims, about 12 years ago, there was a lot of conversation in the Muslim where there was a big divide between the Muslims who were talking about integration, let's integrate and let's try and integrate, and there was another group who were arguing against integration, saying, why should we integrate? We should actually stand proud with our own values. And that group a segment of them entered into academia, activism, the arts, etc., etc. And they used to use the word moderate as an insult, and as an insult. And so the Rondas of the world would call them a moderate. And there was a big kerfuffle.
So Rhonda was seen as a moderate at that stage.
Yeah, because at the time, she didn't wear the hijab, and she
still doesn't. I haven't seen her in hijab.
No, she doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't. And she would talk about multiple interpretations, and there was kind of like signals for like a moderate Muslim. They would talk about Islam having different types of interpretations, whereas the Muslims that were critiquing them as moderates would plainly say what Islam is. And so what had happened is they recognized that they both need each other. So the Rondas needed the validation of the real Muslims, the practicing Muslims, the more conservative Muslims. Right? That her ilk, Muslims like her, need the validation of the conservative Muslims. The conservative Muslims need the Rondas ilk to gain access to wider.
Right.
Yes.
So you see it as a sort of a dissimulation, in a sense that there are some people who, like Rhonda, who are presenting as more a sort of a reformist Muslim or moderate, whereas actually it's just kind of a Trojan horse or something.
Well, at the time, I, from what I understood, I think she was trying to present as that. But fast forward, when the whole woke thing has become what it is, that's been thrown out in the window.
You gotcha.
Yeah, that's
so you can sort of be more open. She is.
She can just ignore that and become the face of someone fighting against Islamophobia.
The whole of society has become more radical or more accepting of sort of more extremist values, especially on the left, in the last sort of 10 years, and probably getting less so now, but definitely from 2015 to say, recently, it's become more normalized.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess a more clearer way of saying it is in the same way that Hamas uses these idiots in the West to promote Hamas to do their fighting in the West. Is the same way you get that same dynamic happening in the Muslim world with the quote unquote moderates and the more extreme Muslims who don't have access to wider polite society. Right?
Yeah.
So in the same way that Hamas uses the West or the progressives to
Mm-hmm.
fight for them in areas they can't access.
Mm.
That sort of dynamic occurs in the Muslim world too. And that
Gotcha.
relationship occurs, and there's a battle between them, but they both need each other at the same time to validate each other and to give access to each other, in areas they can't access.
Mm-hmm.
So they both legitimize each other.
Interesting. Yeah, I always find it really interesting to see like the people that I like to follow. Like it's such a complicated thing, the conflict in the Middle East, and especially for an Australian who's only 5 minutes ago sort of, you know, become aware of it. Australians have been quite sort of cut off, and suddenly everyone's, including me, suddenly an expert. So I always sort of think, okay, but what I like to do is think about. I mean, the truth's got to be somewhere in the middle, right? And so the pro-Palestinian voices that I follow a lot on social media, they criticize Hamas a lot because they say the first victims of Hamas are the Palestinians themselves.
Yeah.
And they criticize Israel a lot because, there's a lot of criticism there as well. And the truth is somewhere in between. So when I find people on either side only criticizing one or the other, I think, okay, I don't know much. But I know enough to know that can't be true. That we don't live in a world of goodies and baddies. I'm sorry, everyone seems to want to live in some weird sort of, comical world of goodies and baddies, and then we all have the right to sort of completely ignore and shoot down the other side. That is not reality. Okay, very few people are extremely good or extremely bad. There are some people like that, but generally everyone's muddling around in the middle. So I always think about that when I'm trying to decide which voices to listen to. And I also like to look at how people conduct themselves, because when there's a lot of dissimulation, when people are saying one thing but meaning another, or covering up for what they really mean, whichever aspect of political spectrum or social spectrum they come from, and I'm confused, I always think, okay, none of us have an answer, and especially to really complex situations like this conflict in the Middle East. But I just want to know that I'm at least listening to a good faith opinion, the best faith opinion that a well-intentioned person is able to make at that point, that they're not trying to put one over on me. So I always like to look at people's actual behavior and how they treat other people and how they talk about other people. And if that is like that passed the pub test, so to speak, if they seem to be a decent enough person who's not trying to demonize other people and just be right rather than actually work towards some sort of idea of what could help peace. If I just see that people are just looking to just behaving badly to other people, then I just go, I don't care what you got to say after that. But if you're just spewing hate and you're just blaming the other side, but then I don't need to know anymore. I'm not an expert, but I know that that's not going to produce peace, because hate cannot produce peace. And that's sort of how I've muddled through so far.
Yeah, but I also think that we also need to, by and large, stop worrying about. There's always room for, you got to respect the other person that you're having a conversation with.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times what happens, from what I see, is people hyper focus on the respect element, which there should be. They hyper focus on the respect element, water down what they're actually trying to say. But to me, in order to get to the truth, you have to risk offending the other person. And I think the other person should be okay being offended. It's okay, you can feel offended, but if we strip down everything, and if people started saying what they actually meant a bit more, I think it would be much.
Wonderful. I'd really like that. I'd really like everyone who actually I do think Rhonda is anti-Semitic. I've seen a lot of things she's said, and I don't believe that she just is against Zionism. I do think she's anti-Semitic. That's my personal opinion. I would prefer people who actually just were anti-Semitic just to use the word Jew and just say it like it is, right? And vice versa, whichever side you come from, just say it like it is. I hate all this wordplay where everyone tries to get the moral high ground on everybody else. It just, anyway, maybe we should get back to some of what Rhonda actually did say. So she's a few other quotes I found from her, because she had her fellowship at Macquarie Uni. She had an ARC grant there um, to research Islamophobia, and that was, I think it's being investigated at the moment, so that's been paused. It was something like $840,000, a huge amount of money. Anyway, so she's come under attack for a lot of the things she said. She said, may 2025 be the end of Israel. May it be the end of the US-Israeli imperial scourge on humanity. May we see the abolishment of the death cult of Zionism and the end of US empire, and finally a world where the slaughter, annihilation, and torture of Palestinians is no longer daily routine. To achieve that is to snowball collective liberation, because the tentacles of Western imperialism oppress and dehumanize us all. May every baby slaughtered in Zionism's genocide haunt you who openly support or acquiesce through your gutless science. So she doesn't pull any punches, and she's got that thing that we see a lot on social media, which is to conflate support for Israel or Zionism or Jewish people with Western imperialism. So that whole sort of colonialist kind of rhetoric that goes on. So yeah, it's it's kind of cookie cutter in a sense.
Yeah, because it's not always about. It's not. I mean, they're after Israel right now, but ultimately, America's another. They're interested in bringing down the West. In my opinion, they're interested in bringing down the West in general. They may talk about Israel now because it's convenient for them to talk about Israel. But best believe Australia, America, UK, the West in general, Europe is an Islamist target. That's Islamists want to establish a Sharia. They want to establish a caliphate. They divide the world between believers and infidels. Right?
It's true. Again, like we hear this, and
Yes.
I don't know, from my very sheltered little point of view, I think, oh, it can't be true. But you're telling me this is how you grew up, and this is like normal and what you're taught.
Yes, 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 and that's what I was taught. Muslims, we are responsible for sharing the message of Islam, of which if Islam is in power, there's no actual real choice. I keep coming back to this. I'm considered an apostate under Islam, and under Sharia law, I should be punished by death under Sharia law. Apostates get killed. They're punishable, punishable through death. Same as gay people. The idea of questioning Islam is not allowed. It's anti any kind of questioning. So fundamentally, what they're against is to me is the Enlightenment, is the individual, is what they're fundamentally against freedom, all that sort of stuff. And it's just, it boggles my mind that they could say this sort of stuff. Everyone that could say this and then at the same time, not engage or just even ignore what Islam actually stands for. Islam means submission. It's not. Yeah, it doesn't mean peace, because that's another thing that is, Muslims have promoted. It doesn't mean peace; it means submission. So you submit to the will of Allah, and you take what He has said as you accept what He has said is good, and you reject that which He said is bad. And being gay is bad. Being an apostate is bad. Leaving Islam, questioning religion, all that sort of stuff is bad. Women being free is bad. So, the list.
It's interesting, yeah. And in itself, like that, I saw an interesting article, and it was basically sort of comparing Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And basically, they were saying, like, one of the reasons that Islam can become problematic depending on how it's practiced, is because, for example, Christianity is a religion that is proselytizing. So they do try to spread the word because they feel that you need to be saved by Jesus and it's their duty to save you, right? But they don't have, there's a separation between church and state. So it's not a political religion. I mean, it used to be, but it's been reformed for many hundreds of years. And as you say, that's the Enlightenment. That was a very, very good thing, right? That's led to a lot of benefits, especially for women, actually, particularly, and for any other minority as well. So the fact that it does try and convert people, Christianity, but it doesn't try and dictate every aspect of your life if you live in a sort of a traditionally Christian country, right? So Judaism is it is a political religion in the sense that they do have those strictures around like wanting to live in a particular way, and especially I suppose in Israel because people accuse it of being an ethno state. But it's not proselytizing. It doesn't try and convert, right? So they're happy to have their state and they want it the way they want it inside their state, but they're not necessarily wanting to spread it. They just want to defend what they've got, right? And if you look at the map of the Middle East, there's a lot of Muslim states and one Jewish state, which is often said. The issue with Islam, when it's practiced in a particular way, is that it is both. It is both proselytizing and political. If you are a real a fundamental Islamist, if you're really following your religion purely, traditionally, then it is your duty to live in a particular way, and that includes, as you said, under Sharia law, which is pretty hard to live under for many, many people, gay people, Muslim people, Christians, Jews, whatever, anyone who's not a Muslim. But it's also proselytizing. It wants to spread. And so when you've got those two things in combination, that it wants to control everything, the religion isn't separate, it's political, it governs the state or the country, and it wants to spread. Those two things that make it potentially quite dangerous. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. You hit the nail on the spot. That's exactly it. Islam, it's an expansionist ideology. It seeks to take over. It's an imperialist ideology, which is so ironic because these people constantly talking about imperialism and colonialism, but Islam is an imperialist ideology. It didn't grow through peace. It grew through conquest.
Yeah,
that's how it grew.
Yeah. And to be fair, so did Christianity, many hundreds of years ago, but there has been Reformation, and possibly there could be Reformation as well within Islam. But as you say, it's difficult because you've got different voices going, and if you leave the religion and it's under punishment of death or under punishment of being, very socially punished for that, then that makes it difficult to reform.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. But so the interesting thing is there's this quote that I absolutely love by an ex-Muslim. I read a while ago. I forget her name, but she's one of the early ex-Muslims. But she had said, what the printing press did to Christianity, the internet is doing to Islam.
Oh.
So because of the advent of the internet, a lot more people are learning about Islam. There are things that Muslims and Islam can't actually ignore. Whereas, say, 20 years ago, Muslims would say the most outlandish things to non-Muslims, like flat out lies, like things like Muhammad, who is the founder of Islam, is a feminist, for example. They would actually promote this idea. And you'd have, Western women buying into this idea that Muhammad was a...
I think I've heard a few... I think I might have heard Fatima Payman say that.
Well, okay, well, there we go. Yeah, there we go. It's absolutely bonkers. And can I also just say that the term Islamophobia is not a real term. It's not a real term. It's a made up term served to silence genuine criticism of the actual doctrine of Islam. Islam is a set of ideas, right? If people want to actually talk about anti-Muslim bigotry, they can, but call it anti-Muslim bigotry. Do not conflate Islamophobia with anti-Muslim bigotry. And when they do that, to me, it reveals that they don't actually care about anti-Muslim bigotry. They don't actually care about that. What they actually want to do is they want to protect Islam from being criticized.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Because there's a lot, as you say, there's a lot of like, within the Islamic world, there's a lot of infighting, and there's a lot of as you've said to me a couple of times, the first sort of victims of extreme Islamophobia are Muslims themselves.
Yeah.
And this is happening, all around the world as we speak. And I think that's one of the things that isn't being discussed enough in the West at all. Like the role of Hamas, you cannot see Israel as 100% evil and Hamas is resistance fighters. Anyone who's got that view, I just think this is like, come on, this is not reality. Like, we need to speak about reality. If we actually want peace, we need to first confront reality. Otherwise, I just see it all as a big virtue signal. I really do.
It is, and we also need to talk about the segment of there's a group amongst the West who hate the West.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a conversation about those individuals, namely Marxist, communists, and what that, the West's relationship to communism, to Marxism, what happened after World War II, what caused this, why has the West allowed for this to happen?
Yeah, well, that's another podcast, I reckon.
Yeah, it is.
Should we get back to our little story?
Yes, let's get back to it. Yes.
So basically, I think we were up to with the 5A group, which is like a group of academics and I think lawyers who sent this letter to Bendigo, which was in July, a month before they did anything. They sent this letter saying, we're concerned that this person who we think is very anti-Semitic will be on the panel. Could you include someone who's got a different view, blah, blah. Now, apparently nothing happened for a month, and then suddenly they decide to issue this code of conduct, and this is issued the night before everyone's to turn up. So I understand why it created a big furor, because that's pretty silly way to handle things. What do you think about that handling, Logan?
Yeah, they absolutely dropped the ball on that one. Absolutely dropped the ball. It's clear, or it's it seems that they wanted to just play it safe, and this climate that we live in, and when you're dealing with people who distort the truth, who thrive in chaos, playing it safe doesn't work. Playing it safe actually gives them it gives them more power. It gives them more ammunition. So they absolutely failed. And these festivals need to actually draw a line in the sand to actually say what they stand for. If they don't want to stand for freedom of expression and debate and exchange of ideas, just say that. Just say that. But if these festivals do stand for, sharing ideas, exchanging ideas, having debates, having robust debates, then actually, live by that value. Live by that. I don't know why they thought they would send this code of conduct to the likes of Rhonda and expect her to do what?
No sense. Like, that's actually kind of playing into her hands, in the sense that that she can actually realistically say, hey, you're trying to shut me down, because they actually were. I don't agree with Rhonda on many things, but I kind of do agree with her on that. They were trying to shut her down. It's interesting. They said the code of conduct was never intended to silence anyone. This is from Bendigo, but rather to allow discussions to happen while ensuring the safe participation and inclusion of everyone. And I found that really interesting, because they're using that rhetoric of safetyism, which was weaponized by the left, like the woke, not just the left, sorry, but the extreme left, the woke, in 2020, 2021, I can't, and it was weaponized towards me, actually, because after the stuff that went down with Verity La, everyone didn't feel safe, apparently, publishing with our journal. And if I went to a writers' festival for several years after that, there were several letters sent to directors of writers' festivals that I was to work with or appear at. And people like Rhonda, Sarah Sully, David Stavanger, they sent messages saying, Michelle Seminar is a white supremacist, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to be on the same panel as her. We don't believe she should be here. And to the directors, to the artistic directors, festival directors credit, they didn't exclude me, but they did a lot of concessions to make the other side happy, giving them their own, say, poetry salon, because they didn't want to be in the one that I was curating or whatever, So there's all this sort of jostling behind the scenes at these festivals, which a lot of people don't see when they're just looking from the beginning. But what I find really ironic is that so the people like Rhonda herself and the people supporting her became outraged that her free speech was being impinged upon. And it was to some extent, but they are the first people in my experience. And I think if you look back through different things, for example, the Sydney Festival in, I think it was 2023, there was some Israeli dance troupe, completely apolitical, but just the person who was putting the troupe together. And I think the Israeli cultural, something, were giving $20,000 to sponsor this Israeli dance troupe to come to Sydney and do a dance. And that was a huge furore. People like Rhonda and, all the sort of normal, for example, who was that artist who was recently, they took away his Biennale,
yes.
Kalab Sabsabi. He was a big part of signing all those things, saying that should be shut down, blah, blah. But then when it came to him not being able to go to the Biennale, to the Venice Biennale, everyone was the first, oh, this is terrible, you're shutting this guy down. And I agree, don't shut him down.
No.
But you can't have it both ways, where this sort of people want to shut down one thing that they don't agree with, but this is the correct speech and this needs to go ahead. Like, it just seemed to me really hypocritical that suddenly everyone, and Rhonda herself, was crying free speech, and everyone in the Australian literary community was signing the open letter that went around, and how dare we shut this person down. Now, if she had not been a person who was the first person to sign every letter shutting anyone else down who was against her politics, I would say, fair game. This is a woman who does believe in free speech. But the reality of believing in free speech means that you have to support someone's right to say shit that you don't agree with up to a certain point, right?
Yeah, right.
And she has not done that. Okay, so I found that really, really hypocritical. So she came out and she said, how ironic that they would invite me, knowing what my book is about, on a panel called Reckonings, where I'm going to be discussing a book on silencing Palestinians and then attempt to silence me. And she said that La Trobe's anti-racism policy directly infringes on my right to speak as a Palestinian, as well as my freedom of speech and academic freedom. Now, that can be argued, but I think what can't be argued is that she thinks that is a terrible thing, but she doesn't think that shutting down other people, for example, Zionists, who she said had no right to speak, no right to cultural safety, because they have a different opinion to her. We cannot have free speech for me and not for they.
Right. And the thing that gives her the right to be, I guess, or the confidence to be a hypocrite in this sense, is this Marxist ideology that, or this ideology that if you're the oppressed one, you're pure and good.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So that's why they feel like they can have a double standard, because they're oppressed, which means they're pure and they're good and they're fighting the good fight, and you are evil. The other side is evil, pure evil, and they don't. It's not that there's a difference of opinion, and what they've also done is they've conflated what it means to have a difference of opinion
Mm-hmm.
versus being hateful. For them, having a difference of opinion is you being hateful.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, Morgan. It's this whole morality that gets laid on top. It's interesting, isn't it? Because there was an article after all this sort of started happening. There was an article by a writer called Izzy Oderberg, and it was published in the Jewish Independent on 19th of August. I think it was one of the best articles I've seen about this. It's funny because when I saw the name Izzy Oderberg, I think she actually, when we were going through our cancellations in 2020 with Verity, I think she actually piled on and she was part of the.
Oh,
I
did
could be
she?
wrong. If I'm wrong, reach out, let me know. But having said that, I don't care. Like she might have called me a piece of shit in 2020, but she wrote a good article, I thought, in 2025 about this. And so I'm happy to quote it and back it because I believe in the ideas that she's bringing up. I don't care if she thinks I'm a good person or I think she's a good person. I think the article was sound, right? So I think, I shared it on Facebook and she wrote an article and she was basically saying pretty similar things. That fair enough if you believe that this is infringing on your free speech, not to go or to bring that out into the public or whatever, but that she hopes that those same people in the future would support her right to say something different. So she says that I see people saying Zionists have no claim or right to cultural safety. The very people decrying the cancellation of views they support are many of the people who are looking to cancel anyone and everyone with whom they don't agree. This person didn't pull out of the festival. Ipso facto, they are a genocidal maniac, is nothing short of unhinged. In the words of Funkmaster Flex, I don't even know who that is, I'm so old, boomer, do you and I'll be me. But anyway, basically, yeah, she's basically trying to say, we hope that this is about free speech because that will protect everyone, right? If it really is about free speech for Runda and for anyone else who supports her, the next time someone says something that goes against what they believe, they will also stand up for their free speech, or at least not try to cancel them and drag them down.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah, no. So I think what needs to happen is there needs to be more courage in the literary scene. There needs to be more courage and people standing up to these people who are creating just complete havoc in the literary scene, all in the name of social justice, all in the name of speaking for those who are disenfranchised and all that sort of stuff. But it's very clear to me that that's not what they're actually fighting for. It's not. It really isn't.
Yeah, I think it's clear too, and I think the bullying tactics were part of that. Like when Runda came out, she sort of said, "Oh, I just decided to withdraw myself," and then surprise, surprise, 50 people came with me, and it's like, "Oh, come on!" Like to me, that's a little bit lower, sure. And also there was quite a bit of online bullying that then took place. Not too much because I don't think it would go down the same way as it did in 2020, 21, where it was like a badge of honor to be online bullying. But there were people such as Claire Coleman, Runda herself, other people, Evelyn Araluen, they put up. Actually, I'm not sure if it was Evelyn. I don't want to misspeak, but I definitely saw Claire Coleman put up. It was a list of people who had withdrawn from the festival in allyship, and they were good allies, right? And then she also put up a list of people who hadn't withdrawn. Like, why put up the list of people who hadn't withdrawn?
I view that as a threat.
Bullied.
I view that as a threat.
Yeah, it's a threat. It is.
A threat. It's a threat.
Yeah. She said,
it's so weak.
It's so weak. Yeah.
Weak and narcissistic and just despicable. Just despicable.
Yeah. On Instagram. So, are you aware of the Instagram account called Don't Be Like Bob?
No, I'm not.
Okay. It's a sort of an interesting conglomeration. I think it's Sarah Sully. I think it's I don't know. There's a few people in there. I'm sure it's probably Runda himself. But anyways, it's very, very pro-Palestinian, but more to the very extreme sense that it's anti-Semitic. So they put under Claire Coleman's post, in the face of a mass boycott, these sessions remain ingrained in history, and so do the choices of every speaker listed here. So that they listed the speakers who were withdrawing in allyship and the ones who were not withdrawing. Remember their names. Remember this moment. Boycotts work because accountability is public. The pressure put on this event should not be forgotten. And then they also, someone else put up under that, would be good to see a list of authors who haven't withdrawn at this point, which actually Claire Coleman did put up, so we can ask them if they realise what they're complicit in. So as there was this pressure of like, you're with us or you're against us. And I just think this is so, like, I don't, like, activism is activism, but this is literature. And if for you the two things intersect, that's fine. But trying to push that onto every other person who's just turning up there to promote their book, we all know how little opportunity there is in Australian literature. It's very hard to get published. It's hard then to get any reviews. It's hard to go to festivals. And, then to put that pressure onto everybody and say, because I am an activist, you must be an activist, and I'm going to shame you, and you're a bad person if you're not on my side. As you said, it's not just we have a difference of opinion, but because we have a difference of opinion, you are a bad person, and I'm going to put your name up there publicly, and I encourage everybody to shame you. Like, this is not pressure that people in the Australian literary scene, which is also really hard to get buy-in, need. It's not good for people's mental health. I just find it really underhanded tactics.
It is. It's narcissistic. That's what it is. It's narcissistic tactics. But we also do, at least from my perspective, we also do need to hold the literary scene accountable too for enabling them to behave this way.
Yeah.
Because when they put that list up of the obedient ones versus the apostates.
That's
how I see it. The literary scene should be like, wait, what? What are you doing? What are you, on what grounds? On what grounds do you think this is okay to do?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Margaret. So I did look to see, in the comments what people were saying. Most people were just really like, yeah, you go. This is, they were very supportive of not just the boycott, but of that sort of rhetoric around, your allies or you're not allies or whatever. And when I put up Izzy Oderberg's article on Facebook, and I think I just took out a quote from there which was about free speech, like it has to be for all of us. And that was my point, because I'm not trying to argue about is there a genocide, isn't there a these things, like who's gonna I'm certainly not one to be able to say I know enough about that to be arguing that publicly. But what I can say is that I know through looking at our little small pool of Australian literature quite closely, for the last 10 years or so, that a lot of the people publicly denouncing Bendigo Festival and holding up, freedom of speech in this, and using the language of safetyism, like we have to feel safe. I'm like, hang on, you are the biggest bully. You guys have been the biggest bullies in the last 5 years, and now you're turning around and you're waving the flag of free speech because finally the right, or just other people, not even the right, I shouldn't say that, but just other people have now turned that back around to you. For example, the Jewish minority, and said, well, we don't feel safe, so how about that? And I see a lot of this now going on with just social upheaval generally in the West, which is that we've got extremism on the left, which begets extremism on the right, which begets more extremism on the left. And could some adults in the room please stand up and say, what society do we want to live in, right? And in terms of our little bubble of Australian literature, What culture do we want to create? Could we see each other as humans and start listening to each other, or do we just want to keep lobbying bombs? And I think you're right. The silent majority of Australian literature who are too scared to speak really need to find their voice, to hold the centre, and to hold extremists from wherever they come on the political spectrum to account.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. Because it's not working. It's not working for anyone really. Um,
No.
it really isn't. It really isn't. And yeah, it needs to change, but it's not going to change until the scene by and large starts speaking about this, starts
Mhm.
saying no to this, starts, to borrow their words, resisting this
Mm.
um, narcissistic assault, because that's just what it is. You know.
And using their critical faculties as well. When I
Yeah.
put up this article by Izzy on my Facebook, and then some people jumped on, and there was some interesting comments, but a lot of the people who disagreed, their disagreement was very much on the lines of what you said, which is not just that I have a difference of opinion than the person who wrote this article, but their difference of opinion is wrong, and because I am right, I have the moral high ground, and therefore that person is a terrible person, and blah blah blah, and there is no anti-Semitism, as someone said to me. And so I linked to an article where I was like, well, actually no, there has been a big increase in anti-Semitism, and here's some people within the Australian literary scene who've written about it. And
Yeah.
so I linked to an article, and the person I was chatting to said, messaging with, said basically, I won't read that article. And I said, why? And they said, it's from a Jewish outlet. And I said, well,
Yeah.
that is biased. Like, just to say that you won't read something, like, I'm not saying you have to believe it, but just read it. And then if you're not sure about these people's claims that they experienced loss of jobs or loss of opportunities because of anti-Semitism, you can look into that, you can investigate, but just to say I won't even read that because it's from a Jewish outlet, to me that is just a form of bias, and
It's, it's, it's,
absolutely right there.
yeah, to me that's radical.
Mm,
That's radical and crazy to say. And so when people say stuff like that in literacy, I think just the culture needs to be de-radicalized, because there's so much radicalism going on. It needs to be de-radicalized. And if that's not anti-Semitic, I don't know what is.
mm.
If that's not anti-Semitic, I don't know what is. To say that
Yeah,
you're not going to look at you're not going to read an article because it's written by a
yeah,
Jewish person.
yeah.
What?
Just because it's in a Jewish outlet, it must be biased, it must be wrong, and I'm not even going to read it. Like, for me, I really make a point of reading from right, from left, from everywhere, because I always think that I want to make my own mind up. And especially these days, there's no such thing as unbiased media. So
That's,
read
that's
everything, get facts together. We've got the internet, we can investigate stuff now, and we can look into it. But just to go, listen, I don't believe there's any anti-Semitism happening. Therefore, I won't look at that article. Like, that's just like, okay, you want to stay
right.
in your belief, okay,
And then
but
you want
just,
to ask.
I just
Sorry, go
think this is how we demonize each other. This is not helpful. Like, if you really want peace, I don't know, I'm Buddhist, right? Peace has to start in your heart. If
on.
everyone had a peaceful heart, and because I think a lot of what's going on in the world and the Australian literary scene, as a little microcosm of that world, is there's a lot of people projecting onto other people,
Yeah.
demonizing other people, and I think that if you want peace, it cannot be achieved with that point of view. You have to have peace within yourself, and then you have to have an open mind, and you have to have a critical faculty, and all these things. You can't just go, okay, everyone there is a bad person. And I'm thinking about those two marches that we had in Sydney recently. So that one I referred to earlier across the harbour bridge. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing a lot of, commentary on that. And some of the commentary was like, there were a lot of Hezbollah flags. There were a lot of Hamas. There was, pictures of, leader of Iran and so forth. I know a lot of Iranians were like, "What is wrong with the US?" And I was like, but having said that, once again, I know a lot of people and friends who went on that march, and that is not their reality. Like, they are actually marching because they're thinking, I'm marching for peace in the world. So I would never think to write off everyone on that march just because there are some extremists amongst them and think everybody is in favor of this. That's ridiculous. But when that other march happened recently in Sydney, I think you had one in Melbourne, there was one in Brisbane, some Australian march, right? It was I can't. One thing was anti-immigration, but there was a whole lot of stuff. So there were a lot of people there, and there was an element that was right-wing extremist, right?
Yes.
And definitely white supremacists. But what I saw from a lot of people within Australian literature on the left generally was they just wrote everyone off in that march as being a terrible white supremacist. Ha ha ha, looking down their nose at them. Oh, aren't they silly? It's like, how are we going to get peace if we are looking at each other like this? Like, just as I would not write everyone else in that march, for the pro-Palestinian march off, that would be unrealistic and bad faith.
You know what's funny?
You can't write everyone else off. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Right. You know what's funny? The same people that will that throw around the word white supremacist or racism are the same people who, when they realize that I don't base my opinion based on my skin color, they take issue with that. All of a sudden, I'm not black enough. All of a sudden, I've internalized some sort of hatred for myself. All of a sudden, some white man is controlling my mind.
Yeah.
The exact people who love to throw around white supremacy and, we've got to get rid of white supremacy and all this sort of stuff, they're the exact same people who will throw my blackness at me, undermine and get rid of my blackness because I don't agree with them, and I don't perform, I don't say the things that I should say as a black man. Also as a gay man, that I don't say the things that I should say, because according to these people, that's all I am. My opinions, my philosophy, everything about me has to start with my skin color. It's insane.
And they're apparently anti-racist.
Right? Yeah. Yes. They're anti-racist.
That's the kicker. Yeah.
It's aggravating.
People who reduce us all to our most basic features, like that can just be seen, are somehow anti-racist. It's like, what? You're not even making an attempt to look at the person inside the package. Like, what?
No, but the white supremacists in them, why they're the same is because they would look at me and just see black. That's all. That's all.
Yeah. And for example, if a lot of people will be listening to this within the Australian literary community, white people, good white liberals, they will be thinking that you are Islamophobic.
Yes.
And they will discount what you have to say because you're, as you say, you've internalized something, or you're terribly right wing or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because so they can question, their culture. They can question Christianity. They can choose to leave it. They can choose to mock it. They can choose to break it down because they're human enough to do so. Right? For me, someone from that culture, the enlightenment doesn't belong to me. It only belongs to them.
Gotcha.
I can't. I'm because of my skin color and because of where I'm from. I can't access the enlightenment. It's just, to me, it's just revolting.
It is revolting. And I think about that as well in terms of, like, for example, when people are sort of, when I saw all those Iranian, Khomeini, pictures, I was thinking, oh my God, and everyone's actually shilling for the Islamic regime. Come on. It just astounded me. I was thinking about the way Fatima Payman about 3 months ago put out some video where she was at an IRGC sponsored event at Western Sydney Uni or something, and she was actually trying to tell people that that the Iranian regime were very feminist and great for women and blah, 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 and very forward thinking. And at that time, only 3 months ago, even leftists amongst us came out and said, oh, come on, that's beyond the pale. Now, everyone's marching under the flag. Things are changing really quickly. I'm like, okay, the Overton window is shifting scarily, where we're now accepting regimes that are clearly abhorrent to their own people, first and foremost.
That kill women for not wearing the hijab. Like for not wearing that cloth over their head. You know, it's like, so you know. So you said you know some people who went to that protest, who were walking alongside people who had the Hezbollah flag. What do you think is going through their head when they see the Hezbollah flag? Do they know what the Hezbollah flag is?
The people, I don't think they even know, to be honest. I think there's that cultural relativism, which, as you say, when you actually really unpack it, if people are doing it with knowledge and not just sort of ignorance, is actually at heart actually quite racist. Not to think that one person deserves the same human rights as another person,
based on their culture,
based on their skin color and so forth. So there is an element of that. I think that for a lot of people, it doesn't even get that far. They just actually really don't think it through, and they actually just feel, they're doing the right thing, and they don't put two and two together. I know it sounds odd because there are so many, we have the internet, and there are so many people, especially Iranians, who are really saying, hey, this is not something you want to let into your society, right? But I think that some things we have to learn for ourselves, unfortunately, through the hard way. So and
it's a real threat. Like, Islamism is a real threat in the West. People like to underplay that, like to undermine that, like to make it sound like you're just an alarmist. But Islamism is a real threat. It is a real serious threat in the West, and I think more people need to wake up. I don't, don't have hope for the progressives. I really don't. I have hope for the middle person, the centrist, the person who's in the middle, who's thinking, who's, not necessarily, who's perhaps quiet because they may feel like, it's just, there's just no one out there who's telling the truth, speaking the truth, speaking clearly. But that's who I want to, speak to.
I think that's why we're doing this, isn't it, Morgan? Because it's not winning us any fans and friends necessarily. But having said that, if nobody says it, no one else will say it, right? And it's not necessarily, it's not even about Islamism per se. Like, that is an issue at the moment. Okay, that is an issue that is actually, strangely enough, affecting Australian literature at the moment, and affecting lots of aspects of Western culture at the moment, and especially with the war in the Middle East. It's coming up a lot. But there will be another thing, and there will be another thing, and another thing. It's not about that issue necessarily. It's about being able to speak freely. And not be labelled a bad person because you have a different point of view.
Even if they do label, sorry to cut off, but even if they do label the opposing person who's espousing the opposing point of view, for me, it's about them not having the strength to ruin this person's life, to affect this person's life. That's, for me, the goal. You can think I'm a bad person, this person's a bad person for having a different view. That's fine, whatever. But the point is that there needs to be, the pendulum needs to swing back to reason, like you said, to freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom to think.
Especially for writers, like, we're writers, we're thinkers, we need to be able to bring it around. And the only reason I sort of focus more on that idea of taking that leap from you think differently from me, therefore you're a bad person, is because it's that particular link in the chain that then allows everyone to start dehumanizing each other.
Right.
And then that goes into real world stuff where the people start trying to get people cancelled, people to lose their jobs. In the case of Charlie Kirk, as we've just seen, people actually killed. So, you know, it's that particular link where instead of just seeing someone as having a different opinion but possibly still being a good person or not even just a person that needs to be demonized, right? There's just this one thing immediately goes to another thing, and that gives everyone the right to treat each other, you know, terribly. And, you know, we talk about the woke left mainly on this podcast because that's been what's really infiltrated Australian literature, especially in the last 5 years, in a very negative way. But now, and I always wonder what people been talking about the woke right in the last year or so. I've always wondered, I've never quite understood what the woke right is or what it looks like. And now I can see with the stuff with Charlie Kirk, and I can see a whole lot of identitarian politics coming up on the right as well, which is using the same tactics, right? It's really extreme. It's really about feeling victimized. So I can see a lot of the mirroring, and I'm beginning to understand, okay, now I can understand what woke right is. But then I'm thinking, okay, so is that the answer, that they just then use the same tactics and then it bounces back to the left? Politicians come in, they come out, someone's got power, someone else has got power, and we all just bounce back and forward, abusing each other forever. Okay, if that's the reality we all want.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think people need to really reckon with their tribal instinct. They really need to reckon with that and what it's doing to them and what it's doing to society. You know, I think people who are having that conversation with themselves are the ones that I have hope in. You know, but definitely not the woke left or the woke right. For me, they're one in the same. They're really one in the same. They're just on different sides of the same coin, really.
Yeah. Listen, they just want to win, you know, they just want to win, whatever that looks like for them. It just means shutting someone up who doesn't agree with you, literally extinguishing them in many cases by taking away their livelihoods or their platforms or their very life. And then it's just an authoritarianism. It's authoritarian, right? Either left or right. I don't want to live in that world. I don't think still at this point the majority of people do want to live in that world, but I do think that if we don't want to live in that world, more people have to get a little bit more courage and start speaking up if they don't agree with the extremism on both sides, and also using their critical thinking more. Yeah.
But all it takes is a few to coerce the masses to do what they want. It only takes a few. It doesn't, you know, it only takes a few people, to really change culture.
Yeah.
You know,
one way or the other.
Yeah. So, you know, we just need to. Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of fear, isn't there? Like, I'm always surprised how much fear there is. And don't get me wrong, like, you know what fear is, because you know, you went through that thing of having to actually leave your culture in order to be able to be yourself. You had to leave your community, your very family, and so forth. And I went through the thing with Verity, you know, much less extreme, but a similar sort of feeling of being excluded and being excommunicated. In order to stand by your values, you have to be pushed out of the tribe, right? And it's not nice, you know, but it's revealing. But I also would just say it's not the end of your life, and like, we're not in a country where you can't do that, and we need to exercise those rights if we want to keep them. Yeah.
Right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any before we go, because we've been here for a while, time.
That was quite heavy, Marshall. I was like, I called you my dog's name. I just said Marshall. Oh my God. He's at the door going, he wants to come
Oh,
in.
really?
Sorry, Margan, that is really bad of me. It just shows my boomer brain. But anyway, I don't think we've got anything else. We've got we had, like, I was looking at different reactions from around the Australian literary scene. It was interesting because I saw Lee Kaufman, who's been quite outspoken, is a Jewish Australian writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's been going around launching a book called Ruptured, which is a group of Jewish women's responses to October 7th. And
Yes.
it was interesting. Yeah, it's like an anthology of essays. And so basically, she's been quite sort of brave, sticking her head up, and she's really got it sort of knocked off quite a few times. She tried to bring up the fact that, like, what she's trying to do is basically just she's basically just trying to retain her right to say her story, or just for Jewish women to say their story. But she got a lot of pushback. So she just says, she said in an Instagram post, I feel sick about what's happening currently with Bendigo Writers Festival on many levels. It's too much to discuss on social media post in depth, but here's the essence.
Yeah.
Writers refusing to agree to recognise international framework against anti-Semitism and considering as a badge of honour to not sign such assurances that oppose the world's oldest hatred should be a concern for all of us. The definition doesn't prevent anyone from discussing the terrible destruction the Israeli government is currently committing in Gaza, and this destruction needs to stop. This definition does prevent hate speech such as that Israel as a country should be destroyed, or that Jewish people everywhere are responsible for what is happening in this war. And I think that's pretty common sense.
Yeah.
She says publishing on social media lists of good writers who withdrew from the festival and bad writers who don't is exactly how the Soviet Union officials operated during my childhood, because Lee grew up in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, where are we going with this? First lists of good and bad Jews were drawn, and now it's good and bad writers. What comes next? To withdraw from a writers' festival is a luxury Jewish writers no longer possess in this country, unless they are the few good, in inverted commas, Jews who are silent or say the correct things and toe the party line. In the last 22 months, we've been routinely excluded from events and from grants and prizes and from most progressive media, and this is racist, and this is censorship and silencing, and nobody has said a word about it. And I think, from my experience, that's true, because when I did try to put that article out on Facebook about that Izzy Oderberg wrote, and to say, listen, there has been increase in anti-Semitism, that was just like, no, we don't say that. So yeah, there's been that sort of gentle, I would say, pushback from the Jewish side. Yeah. But usually then it's just sort of shouted down as, you're just a Zionist and this and that. I just wish we would talk to each other and see each other as humans.
Yeah. That would be ideal, but that's just not the climate that we live in. So then what do we do? What do we do as a result of that?
What do we do, Morgan? Do tell.
I wish I had the answer, but on one level, it's having a little bit of a backbone.
Yeah.
Yeah, saying what you mean, like just I haven't got the answers, obviously, but having a bit more courage.
Yeah.
Having a better relationship to the truth and reality, and
yeah, that's a really good point. It's really important, and just to get back, and I suppose, like, I wouldn't want to be a writers' festival director at this point in time. I think it's a really contentious time to do that. But if you're going to do that, then you, unlike Bendigo, you need to, as you say, have the courage of your convictions. and you need to program. And then when people protest, you just say, well, don't come if you don't want to come, but if you want to come, this is what we're doing. And it's a free for all. I think that's the only way you can go about it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone can come up with a better idea, a better solution, let us
Mhm.
know. But that's I can't think of any other way to address it. You know, you have to be transparent about what these festivals have to be transparent about what they stand for.
Mm, mm.
They have to be
Yeah,
transparent.
it's interesting. One festival that does that is Adelaide Writers Festival with Louise Adler. So I remember, I think it was in 23 or was it 24 when she had a lot of very pro-Palestinian writers, some quite controversial. There's a woman called Susan Abdulwala, I think her name is. I could be getting that wrong. But yeah, basically, she's an American Palestinian writer who's said some pretty out there things. And there were a lot of people who were kind of trying to convince Adler not to platform these people. And she basically just said, that's it, that's what festivals are for, the ideas are there, take them or leave them, blah blah blah. But having said that, she does have the reason is able to say that so easily is because that festival is fully funded. They're not reliant on ticket sales with
Right.
Adelaide. So basically, the whole festival is free, and people sort of wander around and just watch various events. So she can afford to be a little bit more free and easy with her programming, whereas other festivals, people will do things like have just happened with Bendigo, where they withdraw, and then people need to be refunded ticket sales, and then all becomes a economic issue as well as a social one. So yeah, it's I wouldn't want the job at the moment.
Yeah, right. Right. It would be
You're going to take the
difficult.
job, then have some courage and stand by it, right?
Right, that's right. It's what comes along with the job. It's imagine a firefighter saying, "Oh, I don't want to deal with fire, but I want to be a firefighter, but I don't want to deal with fire. So how can I?"
Mhm.
It's to me that's how I look at it. There's always a trade off in life. You give one thing, you're trading something else.
Yeah,
So if you're going to take this role and that's what comes in this climate that we live in. That's unfortunately what comes along with, but
yeah. And
you
let's
know,
get back to the writing. Let's focus on the writers who do want to turn up and do want the opportunity and are
right,
happy to be there, and aren't just there with their activism, but are there, with their writing first and foremost. There's a lot of writers who would love those opportunities. So,
right,
I'm not
right.
saying there's anything wrong with activism, but I don't think that the whole of Australian literature has to be infused with it either, and sort of held to ransom by it, in this sense that we're boycotting things and then putting up lists of who's an ally and who's not an ally. It's just bullying. It's just bullying when it comes down to it.
It's, it's so crazy. I can't even. It's so crazy. It's hard for me to. I mean, of course, I take it seriously, but it's hard for me to look at that and be like, crazy stuff. It's nuts.
Yeah,
Nuts. Not
yeah.
fun.
Oh well,
Yeah, yeah.
we're doing our best.
We are. We are. We are. We are. We are. We are. Um, so, Michelle, I think we should call it. Call it quits with this episode. Um, yeah, it was good chatting to you. I saw people popping in and out of this
Did we get
live.
any comments? Did Albert come back?
No, he didn't. I was hoping he'd come
Oh,
back.
Albert, come back.
Yes, where are you, mate? Where are you? Yeah. So for those of you who are listening to this episode, we really appreciate it. We hope you take in what we've said. We hope you digest, process, critically analyze what we've said, and then you come to your own conclusions about what we're saying. And yeah, stay away from tribalism. So
Mm,
that's what I'd say. Yeah.
yeah. No
All right.
worries. Thanks, Megan. See
All
you
right.
next
You're
time.
welcome. Yes. Yes. Bye bye.
Bye.